Modern gaming is actually pretty oversaturated with reboots and re-releases these days, and some people think they're great, allowing another generation of gamers to experience the games that we loved years ago, and some question whether we really need a third iteration of the same game with improved graphics. Personally, I rarely play remakes, as I can just go upstairs and play them on the original consoles on my CRT, but I appreciate that not everyone can do that. A reboot is very different from a remaster or remake, but whatever your stance on either, I'm sure we all have a want list of franchises that we'd love to see make a comeback. There have been some pointless rehashes lately, sure, but a few of the reboots have been exceptional in my opinion, like the Tomb Raider series, which managed to totally reinvent the gameplay by ripping off Uncharted while maintaining the essence of the originals. Plus, there are a few more on the way, Shenmue 3 and ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove being great examples, which both achieved this through crowdfunding. Hopefully they'll live up to expectations. Plus the newly announced Streets of Rage 4, which is a series that many have been crying out for, although the announcement received mixed feedback. These 8 franchises are my own personal wish list of classic games that I'd love to see resurrected. The XWing series. The XWing series came in LucasArts' heyday, the early to mid 90s, the era when LucasArts brought us some of the finest point and clicks ever made, and also when Star Wars games were actually worth getting excited about. The XWing series was a prime example. Personally, my favourites were the first two, 93's XWing and its 94 sequel TIE Fighter, but XWing vs TIE Fighter and XWing Alliance were also released later that decade. These games were a Star Wars fan's dream, featuring unique extended universe storylines. They had brilliant cutscenes and numerous ships and locations familiar to anyone into Star Wars. The series are all combat flight sims set in space, so you're doing exactly what you'd expect an X-Wing or TIE Fighter pilot to do, engaging in various battles and missions throughout the galaxy. The controls are actually more complex than you'd imagine, being more like an actual flight simulator than merely an arcade space shooter. The reason these games are so perfect for a reboot is that the gameplay is essentially there. They're still fun to play today, it's just the primitive graphics that maybe put people off. I'd even take a remaster or remake, that would be enough to make a great game in my opinion. I actually can't believe that an X-Wing game hasn't been released on modern consoles, what a wasted opportunity. Plus, it's a perfect match for virtual reality. Let's hope that Disney realises this soon enough, and maybe we'll get to see this franchise get a revival. Imagine piloting a Rebel or Imperial ship through space with today's graphical capabilities. Who knows what will happen after EA no longer has the Star Wars license, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed on this one. FZero is a game that I would imagine would appear on many a Nintendo fan's wish list. I have such a fond memory of the original F-Zero on the Super Nintendo, and it's not often I remember the first time I saw a game, but this one is an exception. We had family friends staying along with their young son. I forget the exact year, but the original F-Zero was released in 92 in Europe, so it would have been 92 or 93, so I was 11 or 12 at the time. The son, several years my junior, brought along his SNES for the weekend, and at the time I had an Amiga and a Mega Drive, and although I'd played Super Nintendo at friends' houses, I hadn't seen F-Zero. We set it up upstairs on the desk I used for my Amiga gaming, and man, F-Zero blew me away. The speed and the Mode 7 graphics were just hugely impressive. I didn't experience that same sense of awe with a racing game again until the PlayStation when I first saw Wipeout. We haven't had an entry in the F-Zero series since 2004 on the Game Boy Advance, so that's a whopping 14 years without one. God knows why Nintendo has left this well-loved franchise by the wayside, but hopefully one day we'll see it make a comeback. Timesplitters was awesome. This series was such a breath of fresh air at the time amid a sea of cut and paste first person shooters. Developed by ex-Rare employees Team Radical, the trilogy of games was released between 2000 and 2005 on PS2, Xbox and GameCube, with the first game being a PS2 exclusive. Timesplitters had all the qualities that make a great shooter: gorgeous graphics, fluid movement, atmospheric music, action-packed gameplay, and a multiplayer mode as good as one could expect from the team that made GoldenEye. It also set itself apart in many ways too, having an interesting plot involving time travel which made for some interesting locations and missions, and it favoured more cartoony graphics over the more popular approach which strived for realism. Of all the games on this list, this is the one closest to actually happening. The fan-made Timesplitters Rewind has been in the works for years now, which will be some sort of mixture of the first 3 games complete with modern graphics and is being developed with Crytek's blessing. However, only months ago THQ Nordic announced that they've bought the rights from Crytek and will be releasing a new Timesplitters game made by Deep Silver. Exciting stuff. I just hope that when we do see another one, it remains faithful to the style of the originals. Power Stone and its sequel Power Stone 2 are 2 of the best exclusives that the Dreamcast has to offer. Well, exclusive until they got a re-release on the Power Stone collection on PSP in 2006. Released in 1999 and 2000, they had almost simultaneous releases in arcades and on Dreamcast, thanks to the console's hardware being based on Sega's Naomi arcade system. Both 3D arena fighters from Capcom, in which you take on opponents using standard attacks, numerous weapons and throwables which are scattered across the arenas, and super upgraded attacks which you can perform once you've collected 3 of the available gems in a stage, the titular Power Stones. It's fun as hell, and I spent countless hours in 2000 in my first flat playing the original Power Stone into the small hours with my flatmates. They're still an absolute blast, and they definitely are a popular choice when I have mates over for a session. Although the sequel added some great stuff like the ability for 4 players to fight at once and some really unique dynamic stages, I'd probably say that the first game is still my favourite. Please, please Capcom, give us a Power Stone 3. Syndicate is one of my all-time favourite games, as you probably know if you watch the channel for any decent length of time. Forget the console ports, they're so inferior that it's like playing a completely different game, so if you haven't played it on Amiga or DOS, then you essentially haven't played it at all. I know that sounds a bit elitist, but trust me when I say that isn't the intention, it's just the truth. This is a game I grew up with on the Amiga and then continued to play on PC, and I still play it to this day. The thing I love about it is it has just the right balance between being challenging and not being overly complicated, which many games of this type struggle to pull off. It's an isometric strategy game in which you control a team of up to 4 cyborgs as you're sent out on various missions by an evil conglomerate. The cyberpunk style and the music are just excellent, painting a scarily believable picture of a bleak dystopian future where corporations rule the world through fear and lethal force. There are hints of Blade Runner and 1984 here, and it makes it all the more interesting that you're a participant in these atrocities. Missions include assassinations, kidnapping and theft, and you'll need to take on the enemy cyborg agents from rival corporations in order to complete your tasks. The missions are selected via a world map, showing which corporations control each region, and you can earn money through the taxation of territories over which you have control. This money is used to research tech, including new weaponry and cybernetic enhancements to make your team of cyborgs faster and stronger. Bullfrog developed the game and EA published it in '93. It did get a sequel in '96 called Syndicate Wars, but this failed to live up to the original in my eyes, and I've always been craving a true sequel ever since. In 2012 a new Syndicate game was released on PS3, 360 and PC, but this was in name only as they for some bizarre reason released it as a first person shooter, which was fucking pointless. Its only redeemable feature was that it prompted some cool modern remixes of the original Syndicate music. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh there, as it's not a terrible game. I think that it's actually a decent first person shooter, it's just that I was a bit bitter about them not giving me the Syndicate game I wanted. The developers also released Satellite Rain in 2015, which they called a spiritual sequel to Syndicate. I'm assuming that EA owned the rights to Syndicate, But still, I'd love to see a proper sequel to the original. Hell, I'd even take a remastered version if nothing else. Tenchu had the potential to become the definitive ninja experience in my opinion, but it's kind of strayed from its original concept. We haven't had one since 2008, but I'd like to see a reboot of the first two games on the original PlayStation. I discovered the first Tenchu Stealth Assassins, completely by accident when my mate bought a PlayStation bundle off someone, and that game was in the box. We absolutely loved it. So underrated, especially at the time. Tenchu gave you the feeling of actually being a ninja better than any game had before, possibly even since. The music is so Japanese, so atmospheric and actually quite beautiful. The characters are styled more like traditional ninjas I suppose, who in reality would have been more likely to wear peasant rags to blend in, rather than looking like Karate Kid with a balaclava. The levels are really well designed, not only in their classic Japanese architectural style, but in the way they're laid out to inspire you to think stealthily, to attack your target how you think a ninja might, hiding in shadows and sneaking across rooftops. There are also multiple ways to attack a mission or to take on a target, so it gives you quite a lot of freedom in how you want to take on each stage. I'd love to see a modern version of this, perhaps in an open world setting similar to the Assassin's Creed games, as I think that kind of open world setup would lend itself really well to Tenchu's gameplay style. Another one of my all-time favourite games here, and I guess that should come as no surprise really, seeing as this is a wish list, Advance Wars. I'm referring to Advance Wars 2 on the Game Boy Advance really, as that's my favourite and the one I still play today, but both on the Game Boy Advance are pretty much the same game. There have been two on the DS as well, one of which is decent enough but doesn't really add anything, and one which isn't great. If anything, the stuff they do add makes the game worse, as Advance Wars 2 was a perfect game. All they need to do is take Advance Wars 2, make a new story mode and new maps, and that's it, ship the bloody thing. Before I get any more worked up, I better tell you a bit about the game in case you haven't played it. It's a turn-based strategy game with cutesy graphics that suited the Game Boy Advance to a T. It's fun, challenging, super addictive, and has so much longevity with the campaign, random battle maps, multiplayer mode and a level editor. It's such a perfectly balanced game, easy to pick up, hard to master, and has a deceptively rich depth to the gameplay once you get stuck in. This game would be absolutely perfect for the Switch. The fact that it's online would allow people to play each other from anywhere in the world and share their own map creations with each other. As I said, Advance Wars 2 is, for me, as close to perfect as one could ever hope for, so I sincerely hope they release a new episode in the series for the Switch, and that it stays close to the gameplay of the Game Boy Advance versions without any fancy bells and whistles, because it really doesn't need it. Last but certainly not least is the mighty Monkey Island. Again, the secret of Monkey Island and Monkey Island 2 LeChuck's Revenge are firmly cemented in my heart as two of my most beloved games ever made. In the early 90s I loved point and click adventure games, loved LucasArts, and loved the humour that these games had too. And they completely influenced what I look for in a game even to this day, as I always favour an immersive single player story over pure action or multiplayer. Sure, we've had Curse and Escape, but they had such wildly different graphical styles and, most importantly, weren't created by Ron Gilbert's original team. Then we had Tales of Monkey Island from Telltale Games in 2009, which I really enjoyed actually, but again it just wasn't the same. What I really want is a true third game in the series, ideally being what Ron Gilbert had originally envisioned for the third episode. That cliffhanger at the end of Monkey Island 2 was just begging for a sequel, and it's heartbreaking that this might never happen. I'd also, in an ideal world, love to see the dream team of Ron Gilbert, Dave Grossman and Tim Schafer reunite for the project. The annoying thing is, I know Ron Gilbert would love to do it, but sadly the ball is very much in Disney's court, seeing as they own the Monkey Island license after buying Lucasfilm. And you know that a crowdfunding campaign for this would go fucking mental if it ever happened. I know that a lot of people discovered the series with Curse of Monkey Island, and I don't mean to take anything away from them here, but the Monkey Island series for me gives me that feeling when you get a TV show that you really love and it gets cancelled without having the chance to wrap things up properly. I'm looking at you, Fox. Just before you go to bed tonight, join me in saying a little prayer to the ghost of Walt Disney and let's make Monkey Island 3 happen. Because one prayer equals one chip away at Disney's cold heart of stone. So those were my picks for franchises that I'd love to see get their own little renaissance. Let me know yours in the comments, and as always, thank you ever so much for watching.